Welcome, everyone, to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. And this week is our 8th class. And we are going to be reviewing Daf 52 through 57. Sorry for the change in time. Thank you for everyone who could make it live. Um, so I'm actually going to review through tomorrow's daf. I'm going to include tomorrow's daf, and we'll talk about next week at the end of class. So let's begin. Daf 52. We were in the middle of discussing about where the Kohen Gadol, where the high priest walks through the sanctuary, the Heichal, to get to the Kodesh HaKodashim, to the Holy of Holies. And we said that he doesn't walk between the menorah and the wall. And the top of Daf 52 explains that the reason he doesn't walk on that side is that we don't want him to get dirty, right behind the menorah. As we can imagine, as we see on Hanukkah, sometimes when we light candles near a wall, it gets the wall a little dirty. We don't want the Kohen Gadol to walk over there, and therefore he's going to walk down the middle, as we discussed last week. The Gemara asks if there was a space between the two curtains that separated the Kodesh, the sanctuary, from the Kodesh HaKodashim. And we have pictures today. Hold on. Share them with you. Okay. So, chat if somebody wants to say something. Okay. So you can see here in this picture the dimensions of the temple. And here the Gemara says that the walls were actually counted in the dimensions, right? If you can see here on the left, it says that the wall of the sanctuary was 5 amot, and then the inside, right, number 1 is the wall, that's 5 amot, then the ulam, the next air opening, the I guess like antechamber, that was 11 amot, and then the wall of the Heichal number 3 was 6 amot, and it basically goes through all the dimensions from east to west. And you can see that they are counting the dimensions of the wall. And if you can see, number 5 is exactly what we were just discussing. That's the amma between the two curtains. And here you can see a really, oh wait, no, not yet. Wait 1 minute. Maybe it was last week. No. Okay. Well, we're going to see in a minute the two curtains. And basically, we have an amma, right, an arm's length between the like outer curtain and the inner curtain. And of course, whenever we have something in between, we always want to know, does it belong to, we are on Daf 52, and the Gemara wants to understand the amma in the middle of these curtains. Does it have the sanctity like the Kodesh, meaning like the, I guess, outer sanctuary, the Kodesh, or the Holy of Holies, right? The inner sanctuary. Does it have that sanctity, right? So, because it's right in the middle, does it go to the east or to the west in terms of sanctity? So, the Gemara on 52 says that Shlomo, King Solomon, made this divider between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim, meaning between these two areas. And again, that doesn't really help us because we have to try to understand, again, is it like the Kodesh or is it like the Kodesh HaKodashim? And from here, the Gemara discusses 5 times in the Bible where it's unclear in the verse, is something connected to the first part of the verse or the second part, right? Like we always want to know where to put the comma. Wherever you put the comma changes the meaning of the sentence. And the Gemara goes through these 5 different stories. One is with 5 different verses. One of them is with Cain, where it says, Se'et, you're not going to be able to carry this. The question is, does it go to the first or the second part of the verse? When it's talking about the cups, the knobs, and the flowers of the menorah, it says that something was decorated. So the question is, were the cups decorated, meaning the first part of the verse, or were the knobs and flowers decorated, which is the second verse? The same thing with Amalek. It says that when you're going to fight tomorrow, the question is that when you're going to fight or when you need to daven in order to prepare for the battle? The same thing with also the bracha, the blessing of Shimon and Levi. It says arur, but it's not clear which part of the verse it is referring to. Again, the idea of kam lekum, or you're supposed to rise up. And the question is, or kam, that they rose up, right? Did Bnei Israel get up to do idol worshiping, or is it that Moshe will rise again? Meaning, we're not sure where the comma is in these verses. Okay, let's move on to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah, we are going to, as I mentioned in the email, we're continuing with the Yom Kippur service. And we started talking about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, as he's walking towards the Kodesh HaKodashim, the inner sanctuary. And we want to know what he's going to do next. So the Mishnah on 52 describes that the outer parochet, the outer curtain, was folded back, as you can see here in the picture. And then the Kohen walked in between the curtains. Here's the picture I wanted to show you before. Ooh, sorry. You see how he's walking in between the two curtains? Again, to remind ourselves, he's carrying the shovel, the pan, with the burning coals in his right hand, remember, because it was heavy. He's carrying the spoon with the ktoret, the incense, in his left hand. And he's now walking from the Kodesh. Now he's going through these two curtains. And then he's going to get to the Aron. It's interesting, in this picture, they don't show the Aron. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But here you see there's like a slab of stone. We're going to talk about this stone in a minute. And but in the first temple, this is where the Aron, the Ark of the tablets of the covenant, sat. And then the Mishnah describes that he's going to put the shovel with the coals down on the stone in front of the Aron, in front of the Ark. And then he's going to put the incense on top of the coals. And then he's going to wait till, as you can see here, till the entire room fills up with smoke. And then he walks. And then he walks back. He leaves it there. He walks backwards out from where he came, and then he says a short tefillah, a short prayer in the Kodesh, and the Mishnah ends by saying it needs to be short so that the children of Israel don't get nervous, which we'll try to understand. Okay, so now the Gemara wants to understand at the bottom of 52, are we talking about the first temple or the second temple? Because as I mentioned, if it's the first temple, so then there was an Aron, there was an ark, but there weren't two curtains. As we mentioned last week, in the first temple, there was actually a wall with one curtain in the opening. If it's the second temple, then it has two curtains, but it doesn't have the ark. It doesn't have the Aron. And from here, we get into a very interesting discussion about the ark. And it seems it's going to be a difference of opinion, of course, because we're learning Gemara. It's going to be a machloket. What happened to the ark, to the Aron? And the Gemara says on 52 that many of the utensils from the temple were hidden away during the first temple, and they were hidden by King Yoshiyahu. And this includes the Aron, as I mentioned, the ark, the jar. There was a jar of man from the desert that was left, that was stored in the aron, in the ark. There was also a little flask of the oil that was used to anoint the kings and the vessels, and the staff of Aaron. Oh, that's good for Parshat Shavua. That's going to be this coming week's Torah portion. We're going to hear about the staff of Aaron that blossomed, and that staff was put into the ark as well. Okay, the Gemara now discusses how was the incense put on the coals. So the options are either it started close to the aron, and then it came closer to the priest, meaning he starts further away and then he comes closer, or the opposite, right? He starts close to himself and then he goes further away. The Gemara ends on the bottom of 52 that it makes more logical sense that he would start closer and then move. That it would start further away and then come closer. The top of Daf 53, the Gemara says you have to be very careful, right? Again, if he would start here and then have to go over the coals, that would be more dangerous, because then the smoke is going to come up in his face, as opposed to starting further away from him and then bringing it closer to himself. The Gemara is very clear to tell us that he does not put the ktoret, the incense, on the coals before going into the room, into the Kodesh HaKodashim. Rather, he goes in first and then he burns it. Why? Because, again, we have mentioned this a few times, we're concerned for the tzdukim. Again, the Sadducees, they only accepted the written Torah and not the oral as well. And they said that, or I should say, they interpreted the verse that talks about seeing God or engaging with God. And they said you can only go into Kodesh HaKodashim with smoke already in front of you. If you don't have that smoke, you cannot enter that room or that area. But the sages say that is not the way to interpret the verse. Rather, you enter the room first, then put on the incense, and then the room fills with smoke. Okay, here the Gemara talks about the composition of the ktoret and of the incense. One of the ingredients was called ma'ale ashan, or it was ma'ale ashan. This was an herb or something that they burnt that made the smoke rise up. And the Gemara talks about the importance of using this ingredient, that you need every single ingredient in the ktoret, otherwise you are liable for death. And this is, interestingly, in our tefillah, in our prayers, we have a prayer called Pitom HaKtoret, and it describes how they made the ktoret. And they say that when you read that prayer, you should read it very carefully, because it's as if you're creating the ktoret for yourself, the incense for yourself. Again, the Gemara says on 53 that this ma'ale ashan teaches us that you need the root and the leaves of this plant, and that the smoke went straight up, and then it filled up the whole room. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so now there's a verse that also teaches us or gives us a warning and a punishment for bringing the wrong ktoret. Right? We want to make sure that the incense that is brought is the right one, is the proper one. It's made out of everything. And the warning was said before Nadav ve'Avihu, to remind us Nadav ve'Avihu are the children of Aharon, and on the day, unfortunately, a very tragic day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert, they brought what the Torah describes as a foreign fire into the sanctuary. Um, so this is being compared to this Ktoret that when we go into the sanctuary, the priest has to be very careful that he's doing it exactly the way he was supposed to. The Gemara then says, well, if the warning was said before, but the punishment is only said after, then why were Nadav and Avihu punished? And here is interestingly, when we study this parsha, we talk about what really was the sin of the two sons of Aaron, right? It says that they brought this foreign fire, but it's not clear what was wrong. And here the Gemara brings an alternative reading, and it was that that Nadav and Avihu actually ruled what should be the law in front of Moshe, meaning instead of asking their teacher Moshe, they decided what the rule should be. And instead of bringing, they decided that they should bring their own fire. And because they came up with that on their own, they were punished instead of asking their teacher. Okay, we said that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, then walks backwards and he goes out. And this is learned from Shlomo HaMelech when he was coming and going, or when he was going and coming from Jerusalem to Giv'on, where there was an altar, and it says that he faced the altar the whole time when he was coming and when he was going. So therefore, we see that you're supposed to face the altar and walk backwards. And the Gemara says that everyone in the temple faces the sanctuary, the ulam, and you always walk backwards. This could be a reason that when people go to the kotel, if you've seen people who, when they leave the kotel, walk backwards, it's a sign of respect, a sign that we don't want to leave the sanctity of the place. Okay. The Gemara then says that we should also leave our teachers this way by walking backwards. We shouldn't turn our backs to our teachers. And the Gemara gives different stories of different students that leave their rabbis while walking backwards. And they say even Rabbi Yossi, who was blind, even when they left him, they also walked backwards, even though he didn't really know. It was a sign of respect. And another thing that we do every day is taking 3 steps back when we finish our personal prayer. The Shmona Esrei, we take 3 steps backwards, again, as a sign of respect. We want to stay before God. And so the Gemara says you take 3 steps back, you wait a little bit, and then you can walk forward, right? Because again, we want to say that we don't want to leave God. We say Oseh Shalom Bimromav. So as I was reading this, I got a little nervous because the Gemara says, first you bow to the right, and then you bow to the left. And I'm like, oh, wait, I don't do that. But of course, the next line says no, the opposite, because the verse says you should bow to the right, but the Gemara says maybe it means to the right of God. So if it's God's right, then we should bow to our left, which is really God's right. And that is really what I've seen most people do, which is bow to the left and then to the right, and then you wait. And then you walk forward. Okay, let's continue on 53. The Gemara says that the prayer of the Kohen Gadol when he leaves the Kodesh HaKodashim, what did he say? One opinion is that he said that it should be a rainy year, and if it's only if it's really hot, and that like everybody should have that there should be good leadership, and that everyone should have parnasa, they should have prosperity. then we get a story of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who was walking home and it started to rain. So then he prayed that it should stop because he was getting wet. He didn't have a raincoat. So he prayed for it to stop. And then then it stopped. And when he got home, he prayed for it to start again. But the Gemara says, like, that's not a good thing because people have fields. People need the rain. It's not good for people to pray for it to stop raining. And therefore, this is actually something we should not pray for. The Gemara says that it should be a short prayer. Why? Because if it's too long, people will get nervous that maybe he died. So again, as we know, it was very dangerous to go into the Kodesh HaKodashim, and we wanted to make sure that that he was going to be okay. Okay, the next Mishnah on 53. Sorry, one second. Okay, here we go. We are getting to the application of blood. So the Mishnah explains that when there was no Aron, as you can see here in the picture, there's no ark here. There's just the stone. So then, here, so the Mishnah says that there was a stone called the Even Hashtiyah, which we'll talk about in a minute, and it was about 3 fingers off the ground, and then he should put the Ktoret there. And then he takes the blood of the par, of the bull, and he's going to go to the place where he stood. Remember, he was just there for the incense. He went out to get the blood. He goes back into the place that he was standing before, and then he sprinkles the blood once up and then 7 times down. Let's see if you have here. Okay, this is once up. You can see he's going to sprinkle up, and then here's the next picture. He's going to sprinkle down, and you can see if you look on the floor, if you see here, it shows like 7 dots. So he's sprinkling the 7 dots below. And it's matzlif. We're going to explain what that means. But like he spritzes, he sprinkles the blood, and he needs to count. How does he count? 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, etc. We're going to explain why. And then he goes out again. He goes out of the sanctuary, and he puts the blood that he was holding, the cup, on a stand. It's interesting that this picture chose, actually we do paskin, we do say this, that there were 2 stands, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Then he goes out and he slaughters the goat. Remember the one that said La Hashem? So he goes out and he slaughters. Okay. I just thought it was interesting because you slaughter from the other side. So it's interesting that, okay, fine. Here, the Kohen Gadol is already accepting the blood into the cup. And then he's going to collect the blood. Then he goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim. You see, he has the blood. Here you see 2 stands with 2 cups. One is the blood of the bull. One is the blood of the goat. Then he's going to, oh, so there's no picture. Okay, then he goes back into this Kodesh HaKodashim. He does the same thing. 1 up, 7 down, and he has to count. Then he goes back out and he puts it down on the stand. Then he takes the blood of the par, of the bull, and now he's going to sprinkle in front of the parochet, in front of the curtain. You can see here there's 1 drop on the floor, so 1 up, and then 7 down. So you see the 7 dots on the floor, not on the curtain, rather in front of it. And he's going to count again. And then he switches. Wait, not yet. Then he goes back, and he takes the blood of the goat and he does the same thing again. And the last thing that the Mishnah says is that he's going to mix the 2 bloods together, and we'll talk about what he does there. Okay, the bottom of 53 says that the Mishnah says that when the Aron was taken, the Mishnah said that when the Aron was taken, so then they did it on the stone. So, but hold on, the last daf we said that the Aron was hidden. So was it hidden or was it taken? Right? Taken means taken to exile, and it was basically exiled with the Jewish people. So there's one opinion that says that it was exiled to Babylonia, to Bavel, and that's based on a verse. or as we saw before, maybe it was hidden. So they taught both of these things. There are two verses that imply that it was taken to Bavel, or really that it was hidden. And now we're on the top of 54. Here it says that it was that there's another verse that says that the Aron was actually hidden, right? And then the question is, it says, and it was there till this day, meaning ad hayom hazeh, till now or forever. And the question is, when it says that in the Torah, in the Bible, does it really mean forever? Right? But we know that that's not true. Not every time that it says forever does it mean forever. Right? It says that the Jewish people will never leave Israel. But there were Jews that there were years that there were no Jews in Israel, right? So many verses explained, right, that there were again what happened here, right? There were 7 years where there was sulfur and salt in the land, and there were no Jews at all. So maybe the Gemara says, well, maybe it says it was there, it was sham there, ad hayom hazeh. So those two together, maybe that means forever. But if it just says ad hayom hazeh, meaning till this day, that does not necessarily mean forever, right? It says, right, Shimon lived there forever. That's not true, right? From here, the Gemara discusses the Aron again. If it was hidden in a room where the wood was stored. If you remember, this is a very good review. We have learned this before. I think it was in Psachim, maybe also in Shkalim, that there was it was in Shkalim that there was the priest who was who saw the floor was a little bit different in this chamber, and when he was going to tell somebody that he thinks that the Aron was hidden underneath, he actually dies and wasn't able to reveal the secret. Okay, when the Aron was there, the Gemara talks about how the poles, right, there were two poles that extended out from the ark, and how they were seen but not seen. So the Gemara asks, what does that mean, seen and not seen? So really they were covered, meaning they were behind the curtain, but they pushed the curtain so it looked like two breasts. And the Gemara talks about the love that God has for the Jewish people, right? It's meant to be, right? It reminds us of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, and how the Jewish people are beloved to God. And from here, the Gemara talks about the kruvim, right? The cherubs that sat on top of the ark, and how when the relations between man and the Jewish people and God were good, they were looking at each other. It seems that it was even a little bit more. They might have been intimate, but the Gemara talks about on 54 how during the 3 main holidays, the curtain was opened and the people were able to see how much God loved the Jewish people, as much as, right, a man and a woman love each other. But the Gemara says, wait a minute, how were the people able to see the Aron when we are talking about the Levi'im packing up the tabernacle and all the vessels? It says that they weren't allowed to look at the vessels till they were covered. So how could that be? So the Gemara explains, I thought very nicely, well, in the desert, that was when the Jewish people and God were only engaged. So they couldn't see each other, right? We couldn't see the Aron. But in the Beit HaMikdash, now they were married. And when you're married, we know that a husband can look at his wife, and therefore the Jewish people could look at the Aron. So I thought that was really, really beautiful, really beautiful idea. The Gemara says, so then why did that person die when why did he die when he was going to reveal where the Aron was, when he was going to see it? So the Gemara says, well, now after the destruction of the temple, it's as if the Jewish people and God got divorced. But the second temple, the Jews are remarried, and therefore, when they're remarried, there's a little bit more modesty, more tzniut, and the Aron was not meant to be revealed just then. Okay, so the Gemara says again that what we're talking about, the Mishnah that we were talking about when we pulled back the curtain, that was in the first temple, again, so that they could see the Aron. And the Gemara talks about there being 13 different curtains in the temple. Or the Gemara says, no, our Mishnah is really talking about the second temple. And when they showed the kruvim, they didn't mean the cherubs that were on top of the ark of the Aron. Again, as we said in the second temple, there is no ark. It's hidden away or taken. So the Gemara says that there were actually images of kruvim on the wall, and that's what they were showing, and these images were again symbolic of the relationship between God and man. Interestingly, the Gemara describes that when the non-Jews saw the kruvim, the cherubs, in the Holy of Holies, they took them out to the marketplace, and they said, look at these Jewish people. They have these, again, here it seems that they were being intimate with one another, the kruvim themselves, and like they debased them. They said, look how base the Jewish people are, right? And they didn't understand that it really was symbolizing our relationship with God. The Even Hashtiyah, as I mentioned, the stone that's on the floor. Let's see if it's here. Hold on. Okay, no. So the stone that we've been talking about, the Gemara says, and this is the source, right, that the world was actually created from this stone, meaning this was the place from where the world was created. Interestingly, the Gemara says, or right, either the world was created right from the center out, or it was created from the sides in, or maybe from the sea and out, or maybe from Zion, from Yerushalayim. Okay, Daf 55. We're going to talk about how the sprinkling was done. The Mishnah said that it was done like a matzlif. So the question is, what does that word mean? So the Gemara says it's like someone who's whipping, meaning you're like throwing forward. And the Gemara says that you can see here in the picture, when it was up, you actually lower your hand, right? If you think about throwing a ball like underhanded, right? You want it to go up, so you lower your hand down and you sprinkle up. When he sprinkled down, he raised his finger and then sprinkles down. So that is what the Gemara is talking about on 55. Okay, here there's this daf is very. I don't want to use the word Gemara-y. That's not very eloquent, but the Gemara focuses on this daf on different verses and comparing them, and how do we learn one thing from another, and goes through different expositions. So let's start. So the Gemara says on 55 that we're going to compare the verses of the blood of the bull to the verses of the blood of the goat. And interestingly enough, neither of them have all the information, and therefore we're going to have to combine the two. So it says that you have to put the blood on, but it also says you have to put the blood in front of. So the Gemara says that in front of really means towards, and even though it says on, it doesn't really mean on, it means in front of. When it's said with the goat that you have to sprinkle up one time, and then they didn't know how many times down you're supposed to sprinkle for the goat. So the Gemara says, let's learn it from the bull. Just as the bull was sprinkled 7 down, So let's learn that the down for the goat is also 7. Now we're going to flip it. For the bull, I know that you do 7 down, but I don't know how many you do up. So the Gemara says, let's learn it from the goat. When it says by the goat, you do 1 up. Therefore, you do 1 up for the bull as well. Now, how do we count? Right. So we mentioned in a Mishnah one way, which is 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says you do 1, 1 and 1, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, right? And the Gemara says they're not really arguing. Each one had his place on how they counted, right? Do we say 21, 22, or do we say 1 and 20, 2 and 20, right? So they're basically saying the same idea, just a little bit differently, right? Everybody agrees that you always you count the 1 that was up separately from the 7. And the question is why? One reason is we don't want you to get confused. Again, if you do 1 up, if you then do 7 down, if you do 2, right? If you do 1 and then you say 2, right? But this is not 2 of down. This is only 1 of down. Therefore, you do 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3. That's the way they explain it. Or maybe they did it based on a verse, and then it would matter if they made a mistake or not. Did it work? Yes, Sarah. Yes, the 1 is in reference to the sprinkling up. Sprinkling up is 1. Then sprinkling down, we're going to say it was basically 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 2 down, 1 up, 3 down, right? So that's basically the idea that we're keeping in mind, the 1 up plus each one of the ones that went down. Now the Gemara gets into a longer conversation about the stands that we saw. Here, I'll show you a picture. These stands over here, the stands that held the blood, was there 1 stand or 2 stands? Now we're going to go a little bit on a tangent, and we'll come back to the stands in a minute. And those of you who have been learning with me for a little while, we're going to go back to Shkalim, where we learned about the 13 collection boxes that were in the temple. And they were kind of curved on top, which is why they were called shofarot, because they had a shape like a shofar. So you can see them here. These are the 13 shofarot. You can see them like up close. And they were each for a different collection. So the Gemara says that there were 13 of these shofarot, and it mentions that Rabbi Yehuda says that there was no collection box for obligatory bird offerings. Why? Because he was afraid they would get mixed up with something else, and then they would be invalid. And therefore, the Gemara says that, therefore, he says that there should only be 1 stand in the temple for the blood. Why? Because I'm nervous, right? If you only have 1 stand and you know what you're holding, so then you know what's on the stand, right? You have to pick up something to put it down. You always know what you're holding. If you have 2 stands, so then you're nervous. Wait a minute, which one is which? And we're going to get to today's daf, which is all about the confusions. What happens if, right? What happens if they get confused? But we're trying not to get confused. So the Gemara asks, well, wait a minute. Weren't they written? Why can't we just label the stands? Let's have 1 stand that says for the bull, 1 stand that says goat, just like they labeled the collection boxes in the temple, right? And the Gemara goes through those the 13 collection boxes. There was one for the new shkalim. There was, again, machatzita shekel from Masechet Shkalim. There was one of old shkalim from last year. There was one for the doves. There was one for the young pigeons, and then for the voluntary korbanot, the voluntary sacrifices. But the point is, they're all written. So if they're labeled, why are you nervous that it's going to get confused? It says what's there. So the Gemara says, oh, no, maybe what we're really nervous about is that maybe the person who donated the money died. And as we know, an obligatory bird offering, one of them is an olah, meaning it gets completely burnt, but the other is a chatat, it's a sin offering. Now, we learned last week that a sin offering whose owner dies is invalid. It needs to be thrown out. So what happens here if the owner died? So the Gemara says, wait a minute, why can't I just take out 4 zuz, throw those in the garbage, and say, okay, that was the money of the guy who died, and everything else is fine? So the Gemara says, no. We don't do that, because taking out 4 random coins and saying that was the one of the person who was deceased, that's what's called breira. We have learned this concept before. Breira means retroactive designation, meaning I wasn't sure in the beginning what was what, but now I'm going to decide what was really in the first place. That's called breira. Some sages say that you can use breira as a mechanism, and some say no. So the Gemara says at the bottom of 55, right, that if you buy wine from the Kutim, as we've mentioned, are a nation that live in Israel, and they quasi-converted. There's machloket if they are really Jews or not. But it seems that even if you see them as Jews, it seems that they were not very good at taking off trumot and masrot, separating the tithes. So if you buy wine on Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat, now on Shabbat, you're not allowed to separate tithes. So what do? Now I want to drink from this wine, and I didn't have time to separate it. So what do? So the Gemara says, okay, you can say, and we'll go on to the very long daf of 56 Amud Aleph. Those of you who are looking at the daf, it's literally one line. But this is because the concept of breira is very complicated. So let's see how it works. So the Gemara says the first opinion is you take this barrel and you say 2 lug, a measurement, that I am going to leave at the bottom of this barrel. Those are going to be truma. 10 lug, those are going to be maaser rishon. 9 lug, those are going to be maaser sheni. And then you can drink from the barrel. Now, really, and this is according to Rabbi Meir, really, you didn't do anything. You didn't take off this and you didn't take off that. But Rabbi Meir says you can leave it at the bottom, and then that's called, right, breira, right, retroactive designation. That when I get there, I say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant to do. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, this does not work. It doesn't work. Now, the Gemara here is going to ask, oh, is this your proof that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold by breira, that he doesn't allow us to use this mechanism? Maybe this case is different, or unique, I should say. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda could say, maybe this barrel is going to break, and then all the wine at the bottom is going to fall out, and now you ended up drinking something that you didn't end up giving trumot and masrot, right? You couldn't separate it because it all spilled on the floor. So maybe that's why Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't work, and it has nothing to do with the mechanism of breira. So we can't prove it from this. So we're going to try something else. So Ayo says, you can't make 2 stipulations like one. And this is going to be a very good review for those of you who learned Masechet Eruvin. When we talked in Eruvin about making an Eruv, if you remember, here I'm talking about Eruv Tchumin, right? You're supposed to stay within 2,000 amot of your city. If you want to go further than that on Shabbat, so before Shabbat, you put a loaf of bread or some sort of food at the city limits, and that's called your Eruv Tchumin, and then you get 2,000 amot from that point. Now, the Gemara says, what happens if you're not sure which direction you want your Eruv to go in, right? So the Gemara comes up with a scenario that, let's say you hear that a rabbi is coming to town, and you want to go out and meet him, but you're not sure which direction he's coming from. So here, actually, the Gemara says you can put two Eruvs, and when you see the Rav coming, that's the one that's going to be the real Eruv, and that's going to work. But if, let's say, there are two rabbis coming, right? The rabbi from the town to the east and a rabbi from the town to the west, and you're not sure which year you want to go to. So you can't put out two Eruvs and say, oh, on Shabbat, I'm going to decide which Eruv I want to be real. So the Gemara says that doesn't work, and it seems that that's breira, right? Meaning I put out two Eruvs, and I'm only going to decide on Shabbat which one I meant to put out originally. But then the Gemara says, why does it work in the first case? Again, the first case where it's one rabbi who's coming, I'm just not sure which direction he's coming from. So the Gemara says, well, that works because the rabbi already started on his journey, meaning he knows which direction he's going on. So the reality is someone knows which Eruv is going to be the real Eruv, even from before Shabbat. But for the two rabbis, you are going to only decide tomorrow, then that doesn't work. So again, the first case is not Breira, where the second case is Breira. So the Gemara at the bottom of 56 says that therefore Rabbi Yehuda holds that we don't do Breira, we don't do retroactive designation, and even if you label it, again, we're going back to our stands, you might still get mixed up. Why? So the Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol, again, the high priest, is very weak, and he might not pay attention, and there might be a mix-up, which, again, we're very concerned about, right? The Gemara says, well, maybe there's less blood, meaning maybe there are other signs that I can figure out which is which, right? You need to catch all the blood. So if I catch all the blood, a bull has much more blood than a goat. The Gemara says, no, you still might mix it up. Or the Gemara suggests that maybe there's a difference in color of the blood, which is interesting. The Gemara says, no, the Kohen Gadol still might mix it up. Okay, so the Gemara talks about someone who was once praying, and he said, he put, again, on Yom Kippur, we say this, there's a prayer that talks about the service in the temple, and it says that he put down the blood on the second stand, and then he picked it up and he put down the other. So it seems to not be clear, was this person saying that there were two stands, which is like the rabbis, or was there only one stand? And the Gemara says that no, you should amend it and you should say he put it down and then he picked it up, meaning that there really were two stands. Again, we're going to say that the sprinkling in the Heichal, in the outer sanctuary, was done just exactly as they did in the inner sanctuary, 1 up and 7 down, one set for the bull blood and one set for the blood of the goat. We're now on Daf 57, and it seems that this a person who is very, I guess, argumentative, once said, it seems that you Jewish people are impure right after the destruction of the temple, and therefore God isn't with you anymore. And the Gemara says, no, actually the verse says that the holy presence is with us even when we are tameh. That's the end of the verse that we just quoted before. Okay, the Gemara questions our extrapolations from the last daf, where we're learning from goat to bull and bull to goat, and from inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim to outside in the Kodesh. And the Gemara asks, how can we do all of this? It seems like it's a little bit too far. We're going too far, right? Meaning the Gemara says it's a hekesh after another hekesh, meaning I'm taking it too far. And the Gemara says, no, these are two different comparisons, and therefore it is okay. We talked about sprinkling towards the curtain, but someone said that when he went to Rome and he was able to see the curtains, the parochet in Rome, maybe in the Vatican, right? So he saw drops of blood on the curtain, but you just said that it wasn't supposed to be on the curtain. So the Gemara says, no, maybe it was a blood of another sacrifice that you saw, or maybe a little bit got on it, but the majority of the blood needs to be on the floor. Now come a number of questions about mix-ups, right? What if the blood gets mixed together? What are you supposed to do? Again, remember we're supposed to do 1 up, 7 down of the bull, 1 up, 7 down of the goat. So what happens if they get mixed? So one opinion is that you sprinkle once up and 7 down, and you have in mind that it should be the bull and the goats, right? You do it once, and there should be, right, if it mixes together, there should be, bull blood and goat blood in that sprinkling. The Gemara says no, because that seems to be out of order, because if you do 1 up of the bull and the goat, then when you do 7 down, are you doing it of the bull or of the goat, right? So rather, the Gemara suggests that again, we said we must complete the sprinkling of the bull before we go on to the sprinkling of the goat, and therefore you should do it all twice, once up and 7 down for the bull, and then again with the same blood, 1 up, 7 down for the goat. What if they get mixed up after he already started, right? He did 1 up and now they get mixed up. So what do? So then you do, one opinion is you do 7 down for the bull and the seir, and then you do 1 more up for the goat. The Gemara says again, no, it has to be in order. Therefore, you already did 1 up, so you do 7 down for the bull, and then you start again, 1 up for the goat, 7 down for the goat. What happens if it gets mixed up in 2 different, and now you have 2 different vessels, and you're not sure which is which? So the Gemara says you actually do it 3 times. Once with cup number 1, once with cup number 2, and then again with cup number 1. Why? Because again, we want to make sure that the bull comes before the goat. So if number 1 is the bull, so then number 2 is the goat, and that works. But if number 1 is the goat, then it doesn't work. So then you have to do number 2 and then number 1 again. Okay, last 2 questions. What if some got mixed and some didn't get mixed? So obviously the ones that didn't get mixed, you were going to sprinkle with that blood. But then the question is, what is the rest of the blood? Is it like leftover? It's called shiraim, which gets poured on the foundation of the altar, or is it considered like unusable, and then it gets spilled into the amah, which was like a drainage pipe in the temple, and that's actually a machloket. And the last question is, what happens if he mixes the blood after the sprinkling is done? So the Gemara says that you mix the blood. Remember, we said we mix the blood after you sprinkled. So then it's before you're going to put it on the corners of the golden altar, which is going to be, I'll just show you preview for next week. We're going to put the blood on the golden altar, but that is for next week. With that, I actually wanted to share with you. I sent you an email, but I wanted to share with you the song of Ishai Ribo that talks about the avodah that we just spoke about. So I thought it would be nice to play it at the end. I don't know if you had a chance to hear it. One second, just let me know. I wonder if you're going to hear it. Hold on, let me see. Can you hear the song? No? Okay, wait, hold on 1 minute. Wait. Sorry, 1 minute. Wait. 1 second, 1 second. I think when I share, 1 second. Wait, let me try one more time. Optimize motion and video. Oh, here. Okay, yeah. Okay, now let me know. Can you hear it?
נכנס למקום שנכנס ועמד במקום שעמד רחץ ידיו רגליו טבל עליו ונסתפק בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך פשט בגדי החול לבש בגדי לבן וכך היה אומר אנא השם כפר החטאים לעוונות ולפשעים שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי ואם אדם היה יכול לזכור את הפגמים את החסרונות את כל הפשעים
Oh, wait. Okay, we don't have to hear the whole song, but I always get emotional listening to it. It gave you a little bit of a preview. We haven't talked about him coming out and saying God's name yet, but we will get there. And I wish everyone a Shavua Tov. Now, I really could say Shavua Tov on a Sunday. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be traveling to the States. I'm going to be in New York. So I think that for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to give the shir on Sunday morning, New York time, so that people in Israel can listen to it on Sunday afternoon. I'll send an email exactly what time it will be. So if you want to join me live, that would be great. It's always fun talking to live people. If it is challenging, I totally understand that I'm changing it on you. I will be recording the shiurim, and you can always listen to them another time. Thank you, everybody. Shavua Tov, and looking forward to learning next week as well. So thank you, everyone.